The city was incredibly loud, like a whirlwind of sound that attacked her senses from all sides. Amina held onto her small, worn back tightly, feeling very small as she looked up at the big buildings that seemed to loom over her, making her feel scared and alone. She had never experienced anything like this in her quiet village. The air was filled with the awful smell of car exhaust and the noisy clamor of honking horns and rushing feet. Amina's heart raced in her chest as she took a careful step forward, her bare feet barely touching the cracked sidewalk beneath her. She had been walking for what felt like forever, her stomach rumbling with hunger, when suddenly, she noticed a fast, shiny black car speeding towards her. She froze in place, overwhelmed by fear. The driver honked the horn loudly, but it was too late. The car crashed into her with a terrible thud, and she was thrown onto the hard concrete ground. Pain shot through her body as she lay there, struggling to breathe. Her vision became fuzzy, and she could just make out the sound of hurried footsteps coming closer. A young man knelt down beside her, worry written all over his face. "Are you okay? Can you talk?" he asked, his voice shaky. Amina wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come out. She felt his strong arms lift her up gently, and then everything went dark around her. When she awoke, she found herself in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic stinging her nostrils. The young man was sitting beside her, his eyes filled with worry. "You're awake," he said, relief flooding his voice. "I was so worried. I thought the worst." Amina blinked up at him, her mind still foggy. Who are you?" "My name is Daniel," he replied, gently taking her hand in his. "I'm the one who hit you. I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful." She shook her head weakly. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have been in the road." Daniel's eyes softened. "You're new to the city, aren't you?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I had to leave my village. I had no choice." Daniel squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You're safe now. I'll take care of you." When Amina was well enough to leave the hospital, Daniel took her to his spacious apartment. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, gleaming hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city, and plush furniture that seemed to invite her to sink into its softness. "Make yourself at home," Daniel said, gesturing to the couch. Amina hesitated, feeling out of place in such luxury. She sat gingerly on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Daniel sat beside her, his expression kind. "Tell me about yourself. What brought you to the city?" Amina took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she began to recount her story. She spoke of her stepmother and stepsister, their cruelty, and the night she had fled for her life. Daniel listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then Daniel spoke, his voice gentle. "You're incredibly brave. I can't imagine what you've been through." Amina looked down at her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I just want to start over. To have a better life." Daniel reached out, tilting her chin up so she met his gaze. "You can. I'll help you." Days turned into weeks, and Amina settled into life with Daniel. She took on the role of his living cook, preparing delicious meals that filled the apartment with mouth-watering aromas. Daniel couldn't get enough of her cooking, and it wasn't long before he found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. One evening, after a particularly sumptuous dinner, Daniel found himself standing in the kitchen, watching Amina as she washed the dishes. Her back was to him, the curve of her waist and hips accentuated by the soft fabric of her dress. His heart raced, and before he could stop himself, he stepped closer, his arms encircling her waist. Amina froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Daniel, I can't fight it anymore," he whispered, his lips brushing against the nape of her neck. "I want you." Amina turned in his arms, her eyes searching his. "Are you sure?" Daniel's answer was a searing kiss, his lips capturing hers in a desperate, hungry embrace. Amina melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair as their tongues danced together, exploring and tasting. Daniel's hands roamed her body, tracing the curve of her back before sliding down to grip her hips. He lifted her onto the counter, her legs patting instinctively to make room for him. His hands found the hem of her dress, slowly pulling it up over her head and tossing it aside. Amina's breath hitched as Daniel's eyes raked over her exposed body, his gaze lingering on the swell of her breast and the curve of her waist. His hands followed his gaze, cupping her breast, his thumbs brushing over her nipples until they hardened under his touch. He leaned in, capturing one nipple in his mouth, sucking and teasing it with his tongue. Amina moaned, her hands gripping his shoulders as waves of pleasure coursed through her. Daniel's hands slid down her body, his fingers dipping between her thighs to find her wet and ready for him. "So beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with desire. He slid 2 fingers inside her, curling them just right to hit the spot that made her gasp and arch her back. "Daniel," she panted, her hips grinding against his hand, needing more. He withdrew his fingers, replacing them with his hard length, teasing her entrance before slowly pushing inside. Amina's breath caught, her walls clenching around him as he filled her completely. He paused, giving her a moment to adjust before he began to move, his hips rocking against hers in a steady rhythm. Amina's nails dug into his back, her moans growing louder as the pleasure built inside her. Daniel's thrusts became more urgent, his own groans mingling with hers. He reached between them, his fingers finding her clit, stroking in time with his thrust. It wasn't long before Amina's body tightened, her walls gripping him as she climaxed, her cries echoing off the walls. Daniel followed soon after, his release spilling inside her as he buried his face in her neck, her name a hoarse whisper on his lips. They stayed like that for a moment, their bodies still joined, their breaths ragged. Daniel finally pulled away, pressing a tender kiss to her forehead. "I've never felt anything like that," he admitted, his voice husky. Amina smiled, her fingers tracing the outline of his jaw. "Neither have I." For a brief moment, their lives felt like a fairy tale. They cooked together, laughed, and made plans. But happiness, as they say, sometimes attracts trouble. 2 days later, Daniel's mother, Madame Veronica, arrived unannounced. She was a proud, elegant woman with strong opinions and an even stronger voice. "What is this village girl doing in my son's house?" she demanded. "Mama, I love her," Daniel said. "Love? Love doesn't cook soup, Daniel. I will go and bring you a proper woman." Before they could protest, she stormed out. A week later, she returned with Amora. Amina's heart nearly stopped. The sister she escaped had come back into her life like a storm. "I found her at a beauty salon," Madame Veronica said proudly. "Well-spoken, classy, and educated. This is the kind of woman my son deserves." Together, they made Amina's life miserable. They mocked her accent, threw away her food, and accused her of theft. But Amina stayed. Her love for Daniel gave her strength. Seeing Amina suffer tore Daniel apart. He knew something had to be done. One night, he called his friend, a doctor, and concocted a plan. The next morning, Daniel lay on the couch, pale and weak. "Mama," he said, his voice strained. "The doctor says my kidneys are failing. I need a donor, or I'll die." Madame Veronica panicked. "Don't worry. Amora will do it." Amora's eyes widened. "Who? Me? Give my kidney? I have a modeling gig in Dubai." Within an hour, she was gone, bags packed and all. Amina knelt beside him, tears streaming. "Take mine," she said. "I don't care if I live with one. I love you more than life." And in that moment, something shifted in Madame Veronica's heart. She saw the sincerity, the sacrifice. I was wrong, she whispered. Amina, forgive me. You're the daughter I never had. Daniel sat up and laughed. Well, good thing I'm not dying. It was a prank. What? His mother shrieked. Amina, too stunned to speak, blinked rapidly. You wanted proof, Mama, Daniel said. Now you know who truly loves me. Madame Veronica, humbled and silenced, embraced Amina. But peace doesn't last when envy burns bright. Amora returned, this time with darker intentions. She had gone to a spiritualist, seeking Juju to win Daniel's love. One evening, she arrived dressed in red, chanting strange words, her eyes wild. She broke into Daniel's home with charms in her bag. She sprinkled powders and lit candles. But what she didn't know was that Amina had cleaned the house with anointing oil earlier that day. The charm backfired. Amora screamed and collapsed. Her eyes rolled, and she began talking nonsense, crawling on the floor like a lizard. She was taken away and never seen again. Months passed, and Amina's life blossomed. Daniel proposed under the mango tree in their garden, where she had once cooked for him on a small coal pot. They married in a quiet ceremony, with Madame Veronica smiling proudly as Amina walked down the aisle. Amina opened her own restaurant, Amina's Touch, which became the toast of Lagos. People came from far and wide to taste the meals cooked by the girl from the village. And every time someone asked how she got there, she would smile and say, "Sometimes, the road to destiny begins with a car hitting you."